It started with a laugh that was never meant to be funny. Inside a crowded food market in Manila, a foreign travel vlogger held up a plate of sizzling street food, wrinkled his nose, and said a single sentence that would ignite a storm across the internet. "This looks like something you'd feed to dogs," he muttered, unaware that dozens of phones were already recording. The air was thick with smoke from charcoal grills, the sound of vendors shouting prices, and the pride of a culture built around food that tells centuries of survival stories. Within hours, that clip traveled faster than he ever imagined. Comments flooded in, not with threats, but with something far more powerful: disappointment. Filipinos around the world didn't rage immediately. They watched. They waited. And quietly, they began planning a response that would change the foreigners' understanding of Filipino food and Filipino people forever. The man's name was Alex Carter, a backpacker from Europe known for blunt food reviews and unfiltered opinions. His channel thrived on shock value, and he believed honesty meant cruelty if necessary. He had criticized dishes across Asia before, but nothing prepared him for the reaction that followed his comments in the Philippines. What Alex didn't know was that Filipino food isn't just something you eat, it's something you inherit. Every dish carries a grandmother's hands, a father's sacrifice, a family's history of making something beautiful out of very little. When Alex dismissed the food as greasy, confusing, and unrefined, he unknowingly dismissed generations of resilience. Yet instead of canceling him outright, something unexpected began to happen. Messages poured into his inbox, not insults, but invitations. Invitations to homes, fiestas, and kitchens. Filipinos weren't angry. They wanted him to understand. At first, Alex laughed off the backlash. He posted a follow-up video defending himself, claiming people were too sensitive and that food was just food. But behind the bravado, he noticed something unsettling. Sponsors paused communication. View counts spiked, but sentiment plummeted. Worse, the comments weren't hateful, they were heartbreakingly calm. "You insulted my mother's cooking. That dish fed us when we had nothing. You judged without listening." For the first time in his online career, Alex felt uneasy. Then came a message from an elderly woman named Lita, living in a modest home in Pampanga. She wrote simply, "Come eat with us, then you can decide." Something about her message stood out. No anger, no sarcasm, just quiet confidence. Against his better judgment, and driven by curiosity, Alex replied yes. The journey to Lita's home took Alex far from tourist routes and curated experiences. He passed rice fields shimmering under the sun, children playing barefoot, and neighbors who waved as if they'd known him forever. Lita's house was small but alive. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, and the scent of garlic, vinegar, and simmering meat filled the air. Alex set up his camera instinctively, but Lita gently asked him to turn it off. "First eat," she said. The table soon filled with dishes he had mocked days earlier, adobo dark and glossy, sinigang steaming with sour warmth, and rice piled high like a foundation. No script, no performance, just food and people waiting quietly. Alex hesitated before taking his first bite, unaware that this moment would dismantle every assumption he had carried into the country. The first spoonful of sinigang stopped him cold. The sour broth wasn't aggressive. It was comforting, layered, and deeply intentional. The adobo followed, tender and rich, its flavor unfolding slowly rather than shouting. Alex's expression changed, not dramatically, but subtly, the way someone looks when a memory forms unexpectedly. Lita watched him closely, not with expectation, but with patience. Around the table, her family shared stories of how these dishes sustained them through typhoons, poverty, and long nights without electricity. Food wasn't reviewed here. It was respected. Alex realized something unsettling. He had tasted Filipino food before, but he had never listened to it. The camera remained off, and for the first time since arriving in the Philippines, Alex felt small, not humiliated but humbled. After the meal, Lita asked Alex why he said what he said in the market. He hesitated, then answered honestly, "I thought strong opinions made me interesting." Lita nodded slowly. Strong opinions are easy, she replied. Understanding takes effort. That sentence lingered long after Alex left her home. He began receiving more invitations, farmers offering freshly harvested produce, fishermen inviting him onto their boats at dawn, street vendors eager not to prove him wrong, but to share their stories. Each encounter stripped away his performative confidence. He learned how scarcity shaped flavor, how colonization influenced ingredients, and how creativity flourished in limitation. Filipino food wasn't messy, it was adaptive. And Alex began to realize that the problem wasn't the food. It was the lens through which he viewed it. Weeks passed, and Alex's channel took an unexpected turn. Without announcing it, he uploaded a new video. No flashy thumbnail, no sarcastic title. Just a quiet opening shot of Lita's kitchen at sunrise. He spoke differently now, slower, careful with words. He admitted he had been wrong, not because the internet pressured him, but because the people taught him. The video spread rapidly, shared by Filipinos worldwide who recognized sincerity when they saw it. Comment sections transformed into conversations. People shared family recipes, memories of home, and forgiveness. Alex didn't ask for redemption, but it came anyway. Not loudly, not dramatically, but honestly. What surprised him most was how forgiving people were once they felt seen. Still, not everyone was convinced. Critics accused Alex of damage control, of chasing relevance. And perhaps there was some truth in that, but something had undeniably changed. He stopped ranking food and started documenting people. He filmed a fisherman cooking breakfast on a boat, a jeepney driver sharing leftover meals with strangers, and children eating street food with unfiltered joy. These weren't performances, they were moments. And viewers noticed. Engagement didn't just return, it deepened. Alex's audience began reflecting the empathy he was learning. The man who once mocked Filipino food was now being reshaped by it. Not by spices or sauces, but by the people who stood behind every plate. One evening, Alex returned to the same market where it all began. Vendors recognized him instantly. The atmosphere was tense at first, but Alex didn't film. He bought food quietly, thanked vendors sincerely, and apologized without expecting acceptance. Then something unexpected happened. A vendor handed him an extra skewer and said, "So you'll remember us when you leave." That moment broke him. Filipino culture, Alex learned, doesn't demand perfection, only respect. Forgiveness here wasn't weakness. It was strength passed down through generations that learned to survive by choosing kindness, even when disrespected. By the time Alex left the Philippines, he wasn't celebrated as a hero, nor remembered as a villain. He left changed, and that was enough. His story became a reminder that cultures don't need defending with anger. Sometimes, they defend themselves with a meal, a story, and an open seat at the table. What began as an insult turned into an education no classroom could offer. Filipino food didn't prove itself, it revealed something deeper. That humility can transform ignorance, and that when you approach a culture with arrogance, you leave empty. But when you approach it with openness, you leave full in ways no review could ever capture. Alex thought the experience would end when he boarded his flight, but the Philippines followed him home in unexpected ways. Back in Europe, the comments on his channel shifted again, this time from Filipinos living abroad who thanked him for capturing what they missed most. "That's my childhood," one wrote. "That's my mother's cooking," said another. Alex realized that food was the last tangible connection many immigrants had to home. Late one night, he attempted to cook adobo in his small apartment, following a handwritten recipe Lita had pressed into his hand. The smell filled the room, and for the first time, he cooked not to rate, but to remember. He filmed nothing. Some experiences, he was learning, didn't need to be monetized to be meaningful. The next video he uploaded surprised everyone. Instead of tasting food, Alex sat silently while Filipino families told their own stories. A nurse in London spoke about bringing sinigang to night shifts to survive homesickness. A construction worker in Dubai described sharing lumpia with co-workers as his way of making friends in a foreign land. These weren't viral stunts, they were quiet truths. The algorithm didn't immediately reward the content, but the audience stayed. Watch time increased. Messages grew longer. People weren't just consuming videos anymore, they were connecting. Alex's channel had become a bridge, not a spotlight, and he was slowly learning how rare and powerful that could be. One message stood out among thousands. It came from a Filipino restaurant owner in Barcelona who said business had dropped after years of customers dismissing Filipino food as too strange. He invited Alex to dine anonymously and observe. Alex accepted. What he saw disturbed him. Diners comparing dishes to stereotypes, laughing nervously, unsure how to eat what was placed before them. The staff smiled through it all, trained by years of quiet endurance. After the meal, Alex revealed who he was and asked permission to tell their story. The owner agreed, but with one condition: tell them why this food matters. That video would later become one of Alex's most shared uploads, not because of drama, but because of dignity. As Alex traveled across Europe, he noticed a pattern. Filipino food was often introduced apologetically, as if it needed justification. Menus were simplified, flavors diluted, stories erased. Alex recognized his own past behavior in that pattern. He began collaborating with Filipino chefs who refused to compromise. Together, they explained dishes not as exotic curiosities, but as reflections of history, of colonization, trade, and survival. The response was slow but steady. Viewers began asking questions instead of cracking jokes. The narrative was changing, and Alex understood his role wasn't to lead it, but to amplify it responsibly. One evening, Alex received a package in the mail. Inside was a woven placemat, dried bay leaves, and a note from Lita. "Food travels farther than people," it read. He stared at the words for a long time. In that moment, Alex understood the weight of what he had almost dismissed. His earlier insult hadn't just targeted taste, it had touched identity. He recorded a private video journal that night, admitting that the worst part wasn't being wrong, but being careless. He never uploaded that video, but it changed how he approached every story afterward. Not all lessons came gently. At a live panel on travel ethics, Alex was confronted by another food creator who accused him of profiting from Filipino pain. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely false. Alex didn't defend himself aggressively. Instead, he acknowledged the imbalance and redirected revenue from several videos to Filipino community projects. It wasn't a grand announcement, just a quiet correction. That humility disarmed critics and deepened trust among supporters. For Alex, accountability was no longer about optics. It was about alignment between words and action. Months later, Alex returned to the Philippines, not as a headline, but as a guest. This time, he traveled without sponsors, without deadlines. He attended a barrio fiesta where lechon was shared freely, no cameras allowed. Elders teased him affectionately, children asked about snow, and no one mentioned the past unless he did. He noticed how food functioned as equalizer. Rich or poor, everyone ate from the same table. That was the part he had missed before. Filipino food wasn't about impressing outsiders. It was about keeping communities intact. During that visit, Alex met young Filipino creators who cited his earlier mistake as a turning point, not because of the insult, but because of the response. They told him it showed the power of owning ignorance publicly. That realization shook him. His lowest moment had inadvertently sparked conversation, pride, and visibility. It didn't excuse the harm, but it reframed the outcome. Alex learned that growth rarely looks clean. Sometimes it looks like stumbling in front of millions and choosing to stand up honestly. Back home again, Alex changed the language he used across his platform. Words like weird, gross, and unusual disappeared. In their place came curiosity and context. He encouraged viewers to ask where food came from before deciding how it tasted. Slowly, other creators followed. The ripple effect was subtle but real. Filipino dishes began appearing more frequently, more respectfully, across travel content. Alex never claimed credit. He didn't need to. The shift spoke for itself. What started as an insult had turned into a long, uncomfortable education, one that extended far beyond food. Alex learned that culture isn't something you sample and judge. It's something you enter carefully, knowing you are a guest. Filipino food didn't just change his palate, it reshaped his values. And in a digital world addicted to outrage, the most unexpected outcome was this. A mistake didn't end a career, it transformed it. Not through cancellation, but through community. Years later, when people asked Alex what video changed his life the most, they expected him to mention a viral hit or a career-defining collaboration. Instead, he spoke about a quiet afternoon in a Filipino kitchen where no cameras were rolling. He described how the clink of spoons against plates and the warmth of shared food dismantled his certainty. That moment taught him that influence doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being willing to listen. The Philippines didn't just give him content, it gave him a mirror. And what he saw in that reflection reshaped the kind of storyteller he wanted to become. Alex began mentoring young creators, warning them about the cost of chasing shock over substance. He used his own mistake as a case study, not to dramatize it, but to normalize accountability. He explained that cultures are not backdrops for content, they are living systems of memory and meaning. Filipino food, he told them, wasn't misunderstood, it was underrespected. The responsibility of creators, he emphasized, was not to simplify cultures for views, but to honor their complexity. Many listened, some didn't, but the conversation had started, and that alone felt like progress. Meanwhile, Filipino communities continued doing what they had always done: cooking, sharing, inviting. They didn't wait for validation from foreigners. New Filipino restaurants opened abroad with confidence, proudly explaining dishes without apology. Menus included stories. Walls displayed family photos. Food was no longer framed as a curiosity, but as heritage. Alex watched this shift with quiet gratitude, knowing he was only a small part of a much larger movement fueled by pride and self-representation. One night, Alex hosted a private dinner for friends from different cultures. He cooked Filipino dishes imperfectly but earnestly. As guests asked questions, he repeated what Lita once told him: understanding takes effort. The conversation around the table felt different, slower, more thoughtful. Food had become a doorway, not a verdict. And Alex realized this was the real legacy of the experience, not changing opinions, but changing how people approach what they don't yet understand. The original insult video still exists online, buried beneath years of new content. Alex never deleted it. He believed erasing mistakes erase lessons. Occasionally, new viewers find it and ask why he hasn't taken it down. His answer is always the same: growth should be visible. The contrast between who he was and who he became tells a story more powerful than any apology video ever could. Filipino food didn't need defending, it needed space to speak for itself. Lita passed away quietly years after that first shared meal. When Alex received the news, he cooked adobo again, exactly the way she taught him. He didn't post about it. He didn't film it. He ate slowly, remembering how she turned criticism into education without raising her voice. Her lesson lived on, in every mindful word he chose, in every culture he approached with care. Influence fades, impact endures. In interviews, Alex is sometimes asked if he regrets going to that market in Manila. He answers honestly, he regrets the arrogance, not the journey. Because without that moment, he would have remained unchanged. Popular, perhaps, but shallow. The Philippines taught him that being wrong publicly is painful, but staying wrong privately is worse. Filipino food became the unlikely teacher that broke his certainty and rebuilt his perspective. Viewers who followed Alex's transformation often share their own stories in the comments, about unlearning bias, about giving cultures a second look, about choosing curiosity over judgment. The story grew beyond him. It became communal, a reminder that respect is not instinctive, it is practiced. And sometimes, it starts with a meal you didn't expect to understand. Filipino food continues to travel the world in lunchboxes, potlucks, and family gatherings. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't demand approval. It simply arrives, warm, generous, and honest. Those who meet it halfway leave changed. Those who don't move on. The food remains, carrying stories far beyond any single voice. In the end, what happened to the foreigner who insulted Filipino food wasn't cancellation or revenge. It was something far more unexpected. He was welcomed, taught, corrected, and forgiven. And in that process, he learned that culture isn't something you conquer with opinions. It's something you earn through humility. Filipino food didn't just fill his plate. It changed his path. And for everyone watching, the lesson was clear. When you choose respect, even your worst mistake can become the beginning of understanding. Thanks for watching.